Chapter 331, Taming Frustrations. Having to share the room with Jean, and Kai continued to be a major annoyance for Han. But for another 6 months, he had no choice. "Feel what?" he responded automatically, recovering his facade. "Don't play dumb. It was very intense," Jean insisted. "That thing, like someone was crushing the air." Han shrugged. The gesture calibrated to convey casual dismissal. Probably some professor conducting an experiment. An experiment? Kai narrowed his eyes. That was more than a simple experiment. It was tense, aggressive. "Shall we investigate?" Jean proposed, practically bouncing with anticipation. It could be something interesting. "Fine, let's do that," Han responded, accompanying his answer with a smile as false as it was perfectly executed. "You two go ahead. I'll put something away and catch up with you." The two ex-bullies, much less arrogant since their flash defeats by run, but still impulsive, nodded and headed toward a perceived origin of the disturbance. Han watched them leave. The small scroll in his bag seemed to weigh a ton. His sister's life against his emerging conscience. His duty against what he was beginning to recognize as right. In the gray wing room, Ren sat up abruptly in his bed. The mushrooms in his hair pulsed with an urgent rhythm. "What's happening?" murmured Taro, in response to his friend's sudden movement. Ren didn't respond immediately. His senses, sharpened by the combination of his beasts and the relic, captured something that went beyond the physical. A presence, a combination of energies he had never experienced before. Unlike Han, whose perception was limited to identifying the type of energy, Ren could discern much more. The specific energy signatures, the unique characteristics of the beasts involved, even the interactions between the different layers of power. "A golden line of unknown level," he murmured, his eyes distant as he analyzed the sensations. "And something else to simmer, but corrupted by..." His mushrooms continued processing the complex information flowing through his enhanced senses. Against a black turtle and a white serpent, fused in a different way. "And there's more Chilans. 3 of them, a tiger and a phoenix." "What are you talking about?" asked Min, rubbing his eyes. Rin blinked, slowly returning to immediate reality. The mushrooms in his hair dimmed slightly as he refocused on his friends. "There's a confrontation in the academy. It feels like a demonstration of powers, most far superior to Gold One." He rose, approaching the window. In the distance, barely visible, he could distinguish a gathering of figures near the main gates. The night air carried faint traces of the energies clashing there, like the scent before a lightning storm. "I think the Goldcrests are here," he continued, his voice strangely anxious. "And they're not alone or friendly." "The Goldcrests," repeated Liu. "You mean Klein's family?" Ren nodded. "They must have come for Cashin and Klein after what happened in the tournament," he deduced. "But there's something else. The abyssal energy I purified from Klein during our combat. It's present in another individual, but much stronger, more integrated." Min and Taro exchanged concerned looks. "Should we do something?" asked Taro, his voice low and worried. "I don't think I can purify it all." Rin turned and responded frankly. "This is far beyond our level. If the academy leaders are involved, the best we can do is stay away so as not to be a hindrance." But as he spoke these words, a new wave of power flooded his senses. It was different now, more harmonious than the first that had competed against the abyssal energy. Before it had been overwhelmed, but now it was equally powerful. The energy signature of the black turtle had suddenly evolved into something Rin didn't yet recognize in his library, reaching a level that matched the corrupt energy. He could feel the subtle difference in the signatures. An external object, ancient and powerful, was amplifying the power of who may be self or by process elimination, considering the main beast and its level. "It seems our side has evened out," he murmured with relief. Yet suddenly, something unexpected occurred. His small fungus, which normally remained fused with him and silent, began to stir restlessly. The mushrooms in his hair vibrated with unusual intensity, their glow brightening and dimming in an erratic pattern. Before Ren could react, the creature completely liberated itself, jumping from his hair directly toward the open window. "No, wait!" shouted Ron, turning to the window again and extending a hand an instant too late. The small, chubby being, luminescent in the darkness, bounced against the floor, and continued its frantic race toward the courtyard, completely ignoring its tamer's calls. Without thinking twice, Ren manifested the Hydra in his body and launched himself after it. In a fluid movement, he jumped toward the window, determined to quickly catch his mischievous beast. What he didn't expect was a hand that caught him by the ankle in mid-flight. "Where do you think you're going, my favorite student?" Lynn's voice was deceptively sweet, but her grip had the strength of a hydraulic press. Her crane's feathers rippled along her forearm as she effortlessly held him suspended. With an expert pull, the professor dragged Ren back into the room. Her face, usually cheerful and teasing, now showed an uncharacteristic seriousness. "Professor Lynn!" exclaimed Ren, trying to free himself. "It's escaping. I don't want any excuses," she responded firmly. "Not at this moment. But—" "Listen," Lynn interrupted him, lowering her voice. "Many students are leaving their dormitories, attracted by the mana fluctuations. The professors are busy trying to maintain order and prevent them from getting too close to the situation. The last thing I need is for our tournament champion to take advantage of the chaos, to end up getting into trouble as always." "I don't want to get into trouble," protested Ron, pointing toward the window. "It's my fungus. It freed itself on its own. It had already done this twice before and hasn't been subtle." Lynn narrowed her eyes, evaluating the sincerity in Ren's face. "Your beast separated voluntarily? Without your consent?" she asked, her tone changing slightly. "Yes." Ren pulled at his hair, where the missing mushrooms made him feel a strange discomfort and uncertainty. When the turtle's energy changed, it just jumped and ran away. Lynn looked out the window. With a small luminous figure, the fungus was moving further and further away, bouncing between bushes and jumping over small obstacles with surprising speed for such a tiny being. "It's unusual," she admitted, frowning. "Beasts rarely act against their tamer's wishes, especially low-ranking ones." Ren nodded vigorously, the light veins beneath his armor pulsing fast with anxiety. "Still, I can't allow you to go out now," she declared firmly. "Not with what's happening." Ren looked at her desperately. "But my fungus is going to return at some point," Lynn assured, though without complete conviction. "Beasts always return to their tamers eventually. They can't die, but you can." Chapter 332, Taming Frustrations 2. Taro, Min, and Lu observed the exchange of expressions ranging from concern to confusion. Finally, Taro stepped forward. "Professor," he began respectfully, "what exactly is happening?" "We felt those energies, and then—" Lynn sighed, not releasing her grip on Ren. "Adult business," she responded dryly. "Things that don't concern first-year students, however impressive their recent achievements might be." She looked meaningfully at Ren as she said this last part, her gaze leaving no room for argument. "But," Ren insisted, looking out the window where his fungus had already disappeared into the shadows. The absence of the mushrooms from his hair left him feeling strangely incomplete, like missing a limb. "No buts," Lynn declared, her tone final. "You'll stay here until the situation normalizes." Ren looked directly into Lynn's eyes, abandoning any pretense of submission. "Professor, you don't understand," he said seriously. "My beast is heading straight toward the source of that power we just felt." Lynn's eyes narrowed. The feathers of her crane briefly rippled with concern. "What do you mean?" "My fungus," Ren paused, considering how to explain something he himself didn't fully comprehend. "It has an affinity for certain objects of power. What it just felt, that sudden increase in the black turtle's energy, I believe was caused by an artifact." Lynn visibly worried. "How do you know that?" "I could feel its intention before it left," Ren explained as he recalled the sensation. "And now my fungus is going directly toward it. If it reaches them, and the worst thing is that some of those present know the fungus is mine. If it starts acting strange near them—" Lynn cursed under her breath and hesitated for a moment, her professional duty warring with her personal concern for her favorite student. "But even so," she said firmly, "I can't let you out. It's too dangerous." The shadows of the room stirred, momentarily condensing before Luna emerged from them as if passing through an invisible veil. Larissa and Leora barely got startled, already accustomed to their cousin's sudden appearances. Maria merely nodded in acknowledgement. Did you feel it? Luna asked without preamble, her eyes brighter than usual, an effect of the partial activation of her beast senses. Her shadow wolf and light cat had heightened her perception, making the world around her sharper, more intense. How could we not feel it? Leora responded, who was by the window with Maria at her side. Her will-o'-wisp briefly flared around her. It was as if someone had thrown a huge rock into a small pool of mana. Larissa approached the window, drawing the curtain slightly aside to better observe the outside. Since what happened with Klein, I knew the politics of how to deal with this would be complicated, she commented, her tone reflecting the concern of someone who understands the political game better than her years would suggest. Julius mentioned that the Gold Crest wouldn't sit idle. Do you think they've come for Klein and Cashin? Asked Maria, maintaining her usual respectful tone, but unable to hide her curiosity. It's most likely, Larissa confirmed. The question is what they're willing to do to recover them. Luna joined them at the window, her sharpened senses tracking the energy fluctuations in the air. The combination of her shadow wolf and light cat granted her perception superior even to that of her cousins. There's something strange about that energy, she murmured, her brow furrowing. It's not like anything I felt before. It's corrupted. A worried silence descended over the group as they observed the signs of activity in the distance. Figures moving, occasional lights, but everything too far away to distinguish clearly. It was Leora who broke the silence. Is that? A small luminescent point was moving across the courtyard, bouncing between bushes and zigzagging as if following an invisible path. It's Wren's fungus, Larissa confirmed, immediately recognizing the characteristic pulsing light. What is it doing alone? I've only seen it separated from him once before. Luna leaned further toward the window, her pupils dilating as she activated the enhanced vision of her light cat. The image of the small fungus cleared as if it were closer in broad daylight, every detail becoming crisp and distinct. It was a chubby creature that glowed with its own light, jumping with surprising agility for something so small. Its inflated cheeks bounced with each hop, and its round body swayed as it advanced toward the source of the energy disturbance. It's perfect, thought Luna, feeling a sudden and irrational impulse to reach it, to hold that creature in her hands. There was something about its appearance, about its determination, that awakened protective instinct she normally kept well buried under layers of self-control. The fungus made a particularly high jump. Its small arms extended, as if celebrating its own feat, and Luna felt her heart racing. How could something be so adorable? And why did she feel this enormous urge to hug it? Before she could process these confusing emotions, the door to the room burst open. 2 guards entered hurriedly, their faces tense with the urgency of their mission. Hannah and Hikari, their beasts partially manifested in preparation for potential resistance. Your Highnesses, one of them began, her voice slightly trembling. We have strict orders. Under no circumstances are you to leave this room until further notice. The other guard nodded, adding, and please, don't even think about playing spy or investigating the situation. It's more dangerous than it seems. Leora and Larissa exchanged glances. Simultaneously, both jumped, activating their displacement abilities, their beast's energy flaring around them, but they appeared in the center of the room. After the jump, a substance similar to vines emerged from the floor, and Hikari blinded them with a flash, effectively trapping them. Venus Antenna, Hannah's plant, had anticipated their intentions. I'm sorry, princesses, said the guard with evident discomfort, but we have direct orders from Lady Ashenway and His Highness Victor. No one leaves until the situation is resolved. What none of them had noticed was that Luna hadn't attempted to use her shadow jump. Instead, while everyone's attention was on her cousins, Luna had made an impulsive decision somewhat uncharacteristic of her. With an agile and silent movement, she launched herself directly out the window, her body twisted in the air with the feline grace of her second contract, landing perfectly on the grass several meters below. Without losing a second, she ran off in the direction she had seen the fungus go. But for the first time in a long time, Luna Starweaver wasn't acting according to a well-thought-out plan. She wasn't thinking about her faction, her father, academy politics, or the situation. At that moment, Only one idea occupied her mind: finding that small, bright creature and hugging it with all her might. The compulsion was overwhelming, drowning out the rational part of her mind. Behind her, from the window, she could hear her cousin's exclamations and the guards' curses. But she was already too far away, too fast for them to stop her, and too absorbed in her objective to worry about the consequences. Ren's fungus had become, at least for the night, the center of her universe. Chapter 333, Taming Frustrations 3. In the hall, the atmosphere becomes suffocating after Carson's departure. The 5 leaders remain seated around the table, evaluating their options with the gravity of those who bear the fate of millions upon their shoulders. Lingering traces of corrupted energy still clung to the air. "We cannot hand over the boys," Sulfur affirmed, breaking the tense silence. "If we yield to this first demand, we'll be accepting our political surrender. The next request will be worse, and it won't be the last. But if we refuse," Arturo Dravenholm intervened, his Chelan's antlers still manifested above his head, "we risk starting a war in which we would find ourselves at a clear numerical disadvantage. A 2-to-1 ratio, based on the now blatant alliance between Yino and the Goldcrests." He stood and began creating figures in the air with differently colored minerals, forming a 3-dimensional diagram in the center of the room. "Yano has 1 million inhabitants," he explained, pointing to a circular pie chart divided into sections. "Of these, almost 90% are horde fighters but not war combatants with a rank not higher than Bronze 2. In this group, we invest 10 billion units of crystals from the main vein and what's obtained from external or different sources." The sphere divided, showing a dominant section and other much smaller ones. "Then we have another 4 or 5% at Silver 1, who consume another 5 billion units of mana. At Silver 2 is 2 or 3%, absorbing another 5 billion. Julius nodded, recognizing the figures they regularly handled in economic council meetings. "And finally," Arturo continued, "around 1%, approximately 10,000 people, reach Silver 3 or higher, consuming about 10 billion for their cultivation just at that level." Sirius observed the diagram with an impassive expression, but his fingers lightly caressed the ring on his hand, a signal that only Sulfur recognized as unease. "Of those 10,000, Arturo added, barely 5% reach Gold 1 or higher rank, having invested more than 10 additional billion crystals in them just for their personal cultivations." A small bright light appeared at the pyramid's apex, representing the culmination of single investment and cultivation. And at the top, our king, whose individual cultivation represents an investment of more than 500 million by itself. Our special weapon that cannot be harmed by silver rank tamers. He paused briefly while creating another separate section next to the first. The mineral particles rearranged themselves, forming a comparative model of the neighboring kingdom. "And do you know how Yino compares?" Arturo adjusted the diagram, looking primarily at Victor and Ignatius, creating a second pyramid. "Yino has a similar distribution in terms of total population, approximately 1 million inhabitants, and access to a similar amount of mana. The main difference, besides lacking a king of our level, is their distribution of ranks." The second pyramid reconfigured itself, expanding in the middle and narrowing at the top. The visual contrast between the two power structures was immediately apparent. There, bronze ranks occupy 60%, while low Silver 1 represents 35%. This comes at the expense of their higher levels, of course, but it gives them a broader base of decent combatants. "To that, we must add the situation with the Goldcrests," added Ignatius, connecting the pieces. "If they fight against us, the balance would tilt drastically." Arturo nodded, expanding his diagram. The mineral particles shifted, creating a new configuration that illustrated the potential alliance. "Exactly. If the approximately 300,000 inhabitants of the territories under Goldcrest influence change sides, we would be talking about going from a battle between equivalent forces, 1 million against 1 million, to a significant imbalance." The numbers floated, reorganizing themselves into a stark visual representation of the potential conflict. More than 1.3 million against less than 0.7 million. Basically, a 1 against 2. Arturo paused, letting the gravity of the situation settle. And if the abyssal corruption continues expanding at the rate Karzan implied, we could be facing a 1-against-3 in beast numbers and power. Julius rose abruptly, shaking his head. His Qilin manifested more fully. Your demographic branch calculations are impressive, brother, but they leave aside a crucial factor, the quality of our higher lines. He pointed to the apex of Yano's pyramid. This is, without a doubt, our advantage. If it were really a 3-against-1, as you suggest, they would have attacked already. He approached the diagram, adjusting it. I think Karzan came precisely to measure strengths, to correctly understand the real gap between our capabilities. A tense smile appeared on his face. What he saw probably confirmed to him that they don't have such an overwhelming advantage as they would like to believe. Arturo frowned, reconsidering his analysis. Then you suggest that if we count the 3 main families of Yano against the 3 of Yino, and one of ours goes to the opposite side, we're not really in a 2-against-4? Exactly, Julius confirmed. Calculating quality and not just quantity, we're probably in a 2.5-against-4, where the gold crests only count as 1 on that scale, and without Father here, which would mean, Arturo began as the implications became clear. It would mean that we would quickly crush the gold crests and then lose the real war, but also with enormous losses for Yino, Julius concluded. So it's logical to expect that the gold crests wouldn't rise alone or be the first to attack. Victor, who had remained silent but attentive, intervened then. So basically the 5-against-7 or 8, if we don't want to talk about fractions. He traced lines connecting the different forces. We're worth 5, the gold crests are worth 2, and Yino is worth between 5 and 6, depending on how many abyssal warriors they manage to integrate. Selphra nodded, her eyes reflecting wisdom accumulated over many decades. I agree with Julius's assessment. Karzan may be immature and greedy, but he's not a fool. He wouldn't initiate a conflict unless he was sure of his victory. He probably aspires to create a scenario of 5-against-9, or even 10, before launching a direct attack. Which gives us time, concluded Sirius, speaking for the first time since the beginning of this discussion. Time that we must use wisely. The tension in the room was palpable, as each processed the strategic implications. A power balance so delicate meant that any decision, even something seemingly minor like the release of 2 students, could tip the scales toward a devastating conflict. So, what is the best response to Karzan? Ignatius finally asked, verbalizing question that weighed on everyone. A prolonged silence followed Ignatius's question. Each of the leaders weighed the terrible consequences of any decision they might make. If Karzan truly realized that his corrupt power isn't as strong as he initially thought, Julius reflected, perhaps we can prevent him from doing something stupid and sacrifice his faction just to give Yino the perfect moment to attack. Sirius, who had remained mostly silent, looked up. His eyes, normally cold and expressionless, showed a flash of inspiration. What if we get him just one of his sons? He suggested, his voice low but firm. Everyone turned to him, surprised by the proposal. Just one? Asked Victor, frowning. Which one? Klein. Sirius responded without hesitation. The younger one. Cashin's experiment failed thanks to that mushroom kid's intervention, and Klein seems largely purified. But we shouldn't free the aggressor. We know what the younger brother said is true. Selphra nodded slowly, considering proposal. A middle ground, she murmured. We don't yield completely, but we don't refuse outright either. We would keep Cashin for investigation, and as proof that we don't tolerate abyssal experimentation, added Arturo. But we would return one son to Karzan as a show of political respect. And more importantly, observed Julius, we would avoid giving the impression of total surrender. The 5 reflected in silence for several minutes, evaluating the pros and cons of this intermediate approach. And if he rejects the option, Sirius asked what no one wanted to consider. If he rejects this option, Ignatius finally said, I'm afraid you would have to consider another alternative. Consider a definitive solution. The words hung suspended in the air, but their meaning was crystal clear to everyone present. Eliminate his entire faction, Victor verbalized with raw frankness, in the quickest and most efficient way possible. If we do something like that, there would be a very high risk of provoking an immediate response from Yino, Arturo warned. We would need to gather enough power to take down his 100 combatants simultaneously, without giving them time to flee, or even communicate to call for reinforcements. A most complicated situation as we are right now, sighed Selphira, and with a non-existent margin of error. Julius stood up, walking to the window that faced the Goldcrest temporary camp. His Qilin faded, leaving him looking strangely vulnerable against the backdrop of the night sky. For the moment, we must make preparations for both options, he declared. But clearly, negotiation is the preferable path. He turned back to the others, his face somber. I regret that Zhao is taking so long to send a report after surpassing the second silver ring, he confessed. Unfortunately, communication birds cannot escape the level of the creatures of Ring 3 and beyond. Don't worry, Selphira reassured him, a sardonic smile appearing on her lips. Although I'm old, I can still keep the bully at bay for you while the idiot king arrives. The comment momentarily lightened the atmosphere, eliciting tense smiles from the Dravenholm brothers. But Sirius instinctively touched the ring on his hand, a gesture that didn't go unnoticed by Selphira. She knew that the Starweaver family's protector was worried. Selphira was strong, without a doubt, but the burden of confronting a corrupted Karzan empowered by abyssal energy was immense, even for someone of her level. Chapter 334, Taming Frustrations 4. So, are we in agreement? Asked Ignatius, returning to the main thread of the discussion. We'll offer Klein as a gesture of goodwill, but keep Cashin in custody as an unequivocal message against abyssal experimentation? One by one, the leaders nodded. Ring, ring, ring. The small fungus's consciousness flowed in ways few beings could comprehend. It didn't think with words, but with sensations, purposes, and an instinctive understanding of the energy surrounding it. Normally, it remained dormant within the human to whom it was bonded, simply facilitating access to information and process in the light of the ring they had already incorporated, a peaceful, symbiotic existence, where its true nature remained in a state of constant hibernation. But that changed when it felt it. It was as if its stomach jolted it awake suddenly, although it wasn't really a stomach. Its body functioned more like an interconnected network without defined organs. However, this would be the simplest explanation for its immature tamer, if he ever needed to understand it. The call was irresistible. Another main ring, another fragment of that which constituted its existential purpose. With a determination that surprised even Run, the small fruiting body separated from the tamer, jumping toward the window. It knew its tamer would try to stop it. The human would never understand the importance of certain imperatives, always worried about inconsequential things like consequences and permissions, such limited perspectives, when the true nature reality was so much more complex. The small fungus bounced across the courtyard, its chubby little body contrasting with the surprising agility of its movements. With each hop, its perception sharpened, locating with greater precision the source of that energy that called to it, growing ever closer. Close, close, close. Its receptor roots detected a change in the environment. A new presence was approaching from another direction. Not its tamer, but a different yet familiar energy. The girl with the wolf and the cat. The one carrying a genetic key that, though interesting, was immature, not yet useful to it. Why does everyone have to interfere? Would be the translation, if its thoughts were formulated in words. Can a poor primordia be left in peace to fulfill its purpose? The small fungus accelerated, determined to reach the ring, before anything else could stop it. It could almost feel it now, that delicious energy that would perfectly complement what it had already begun with the first ring. The resonance called to it, promising completion of a cycle begun ages ago. It made a particularly high jump, extending its tiny arms to gain momentum, when suddenly its trajectory was interrupted. Two hands caught it in midair. No, no, no. Before it could process what was happening, it found itself wrapped in an embrace so tight that it felt as if its quasi-fruiting body would disappear, compress into non-existence back to its tamer. Its consciousness staggered, momentarily disoriented by the pressure. When the embrace finally loosened, the wolf-cat girl held it in front of her face, studying it with enormous, bright eyes. Luna, that was her name in human language. Its receptors captured waves of emotion it couldn't fully classify. Admiration? Adoration? Some strange human ritual it was unfamiliar with. The intensity of her emotional emanations was almost painful to its sensitive receptors. Luna rubbed her cheek against it, and the fungus experienced sensations for which its existence had not prepared it. Its spongy texture compressed with each rub, while the girl murmured incomprehensible words. The intense physical contact sent chaotic signals through its network, disrupting its usual patterns of thought. Then, Luna held it away again, holding it with both hands, observing it as if it were the most precious treasure in the world. With surprising gentleness, she pressed its small inflated cheeks with her index fingers and thumbs. "Kaya!" Luna exclaimed with a high-pitched sound that made the fungus's receptors vibrate as its cheeks were pulled. "It's so adorable, so squishy and perfect." The small being shuddered, genuinely frightened. Its experiences since birth included nothing remotely similar to the situation. What human ritual was this? Was it perhaps some unknown form of torture? Luna's face began moving closer and closer, her enormous eyes fixed on it with a disturbing intensity. Confusion and fear finally overcame its limitations, and the fungus did something it had rarely done since its conception. Speak. "Leave me alone," it squeaked in a high-pitched nasal voice. "What kind of torture ritual is this? If you're going to torture me, at least ask me some questions first. I should have rights as a cognitive symbiotic creature." Luna froze mid-movement, her eyes opening even wider if that was possible. The astonishment on her face was so palpable that even the fungus, with its limited understanding of human expressions, could interpret it. "You can talk?" Luna asked, her voice barely a whisper. The fungus considered returning to its habitual silence, but it was already too late to pretend. "Obviously I can talk," it replied in an irritated tone. "I just don't have anything interesting to say to humans. Occupied with your insignificant problems." Instead of releasing it, as the fungus expected, Luna emitted another high-pitched squeal, this one even more intense than the previous one. "It's even more perfect," she exclaimed, bringing it close to her face again. "Your little voice is so adorable I could listen to it all day. Talk more. Say something else." Panic seized the small being. This was worse than being chased, worse than being stopped. If it had had a heart, it would be frantically beating. "Help!" It shouted with all its might, hoping its tamer or any other rational creature might hear it. "Help! I'm being kidnapped. I just wanted to absorb a simple ring. I don't deserve this suffering." Luna let out a delighted giggle, as if the fungus's desperate cries were the most delicious thing she had ever heard. "You're the most adorable little creature in the world," she declared with absolute conviction. "And now you're my friend." "I'm not adorable," the fungus protested, trying to wriggle between her fingers. "I am an arcane entity with complex and existential purposes, and I am enormous. Let me go, wolf-cat girl. The ring is calling me." "I'll call you Mashido," Luna continued, completely oblivious to her captive's protests. Horror seized the fungus as it realized its suffering had only just begun. Chapter 335, Taming Frustration 5. "You four, what are you doing outside your rooms at this hour?" Lynn's voice resonated to the hallway as she pointed accusingly at a group of students who had ventured out to investigate the source of the energy disturbance. The boys, from another section of the Gray Wing, shrank under the intensity of her gaze. "Professor Lynn," one of them stammered. "We just wanted to see what was happening. We felt that strange energy and—" "Silence!" Lynn cut him off. "Students must remain in their rooms for their own safety. Go inside now." While Lynn continued her scolding, Min discreetly approached Run, placing a hand on his shoulder. "It's now or never," he whispered, activating his aquatic amphibian. "Borrow its invisibility." Rin felt the translucent creature separate from Min and adhere to his shoulder, extending its effect over him. His body began to vanish, gradually becoming transparent. The sensation was peculiar, like being immersed in cool water that somehow passed through skin rather than around it. Lou positioned himself strategically behind Lin, combining with his bat and making a subtle gesture with his hands. The sound around Rin seemed to fade, dampening any noise he might make. Taro, understanding the plan without needing words, deliberately advanced toward Lin. But Lin sensed Taro's footsteps and turned around, narrowing her eyes suspiciously. "And where's Run?" Taro averted his gaze and began to sweat. He needed a moment. In the bathroom. Said he'd be right back. While Lynn divided her attention between Taro and the troublesome students, Rin had already taken advantage to slip through the window, moving with the utmost caution. Thanks to Min's invisibility and Lou's sound suppression, he managed to reach the windowsill without being detected. The cool night air brushed against his invisible form, a strange sensation when he couldn't see his own body. "Sorry, Lynn," he thought as he jumped to the exterior, "but I need to recover my mischievous beast." From the courtyard, still invisible thanks to the borrowed amphibian, he could hear Lynn's furious exclamation when she finally realized she had been deceived, promising retribution that made Rin wince in sympathy for his friends. "I'll remember your sacrifice, guys," Rin murmured to himself as he hurried away. "Once I find my fungus, I'll pay you in full." However, the task proved more complicated than he had anticipated. The absence of his main beast deprived him of much of his enhanced perception. He felt partially blind, trying to navigate a world that suddenly seemed more opaque and confusing. Rin attempted to establish contact through the mana bond he shared with his fungus, a connection that normally allowed a tamer to synchronize even at a distance. But for some reason, the connection seemed blocked, as if a small beast was deliberately ignoring his calls with immense strength. Rin felt like he was trying to pull a giant tree with roots hundreds of kilometers long. "What suddenly happened to you?" he murmured worriedly as he moved cautiously between bushes and trees, avoiding the professors and auxiliaries patrolling the grounds, returning curious students to their dormitories. The invisibility borrowed from Min's amphibian gave him a significant advantage, allowing him to go unnoticed even when he nearly stumbled upon a group of professors discussing in low voices near the building. Their hushed tones carried fragments of concern about gold-crest demands and potential conflict. Rounding a particularly dense hedge, Rin heard familiar voices. Jean and Kai were being escorted back to their dormitory by a visibly irritated auxiliary teacher. Unacceptable behavior, the professor was saying, especially during a sensitive situation like this. "We just wanted to see what was happening." Jean protested with his usual arrogance, though considerably diminished in the face of authority. "How are we supposed to learn if they keep us away from everything interesting?" Rin crouched behind some bushes, waiting for them to pass. It was then that he noticed another figure moving stealthily several meters behind the group. It was Han, who had been following his roommates at a prudent distance and used them as bait. His movements were precise, fast, nothing like the casual wandering of a curious student. While the professor continued reprimanding Jean and Kai, Han suddenly stopped. His head turned, as if it perceived something, and to Ren's surprise, looked directly at the bushes where he was hiding. With quick and natural movements, as soon as the professor and the others disappeared from view, Han approached the bushes, his posture alert but outwardly casual. "Ren," he whispered, so low it was barely audible. "I know you're around here." Ren remained motionless, impressed by Han's perceptive ability. Despite the invisibility, he had somehow detected his presence. Carefully, Ren approached Han, the amphibian still attached to his shoulder, maintaining his invisibility. "Don't make noise," Ren whispered near Han's ear, who gave a small start despite having been the one to initiate contact. "Run." Han turned his head, his eyes searching the empty air. "It is you, right?" "Yes," Rin confirmed in a barely audible whisper. "I'm using Min's invisibility." Han nodded, maintaining a neutral expression. His eyes continued to scan the area, the practiced vigilance of someone accustomed to surveillance. "It's dangerous to be here," Han warned in a low voice. "What's happening isn't something you should explore as you always do. You should return to your room." "I appreciate your concern," Rin responded, "but I'm not here out of curiosity. My fungus escaped." Han blinked, genuinely surprised. For a moment, his carefully maintained composure slipped. "Your fungus? Escaped? How is that possible?" "I don't know," Rin admitted, frustration evident in his whispered voice. "It had done something like this once before, but I can't control it." We were in the room, felt those waves of power, and suddenly it jumped out the window and ran off. Han frowned, processing the information. Something about this didn't align with his understanding of beast behavior. But nothing will happen, right? Beasts always return. You should go back to your room and... Han, Rin whispered. If it's so dangerous to be outside, why are you here? A tense silence followed the question. Han hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. The warning words in the last letter he had received resonated in his mind, along with the implicit threat against his sister if his reports continued to be useless. His training urged caution, silence, deflection, but something else pushed against those instincts. Seeing that Han wasn't responding, Rin decided to press a little more. I understand if you have your own reasons, he said softly. I have mine too. When Rin made a move to continue advancing, Han extended his arm, blocking the path, although he couldn't exactly see where his invisible friend was. Wait, please, Han requested, his voice barely audible. The strain of indecision was evident in the tight line of his mouth. He considered using a spider thread to stop him, but knew that Rin was exceptionally agile and quick. Although at that moment Rin faced perceptive difficulties without his fungus as the main beast in his body and probably couldn't detect his invisible threads, Han didn't know this. After a moment of inner indecision, Han made a decision he would never have considered possible weeks ago. I can sense abyssal energy, he confessed, carefully choosing his words. What's happening now? It seems the Goldcrests are preparing for a confrontation with Yano's main families. The probability of conflict is, he paused, high. How do you know that? Rin asked, feigning ignorance, although he had actually perceived the same situation thanks to his fungus before it escaped. It's an ability of my spider. Han responded automatically, masterfully adding the lie to the truth. There was a silence charged with tension. If you're going to tell me lies, Rin said with surprising coldness, I prefer you don't tell me anything. I'll continue alone. Han felt as if an invisible fist was squeezing his chest. Rin knew something, or at least suspected enough to detect his falsehood. Indecision paralyzed him momentarily. All his training as an agent screamed at him to maintain his cover, to invent another, more credible explanation. But something deeper, something that had begun to change since he met Ron, and the others, since he stood in front to save, to protect him, urged Han to do the unthinkable. Wait, he called again, perhaps making the most important decision of his life. I'll trust you. And to his own surprise, Han bowed until his forehead touched the ground, a gesture of absolute humility. I'm a spy, he confessed, his voice barely a whisper. From Yino. My sister is being held there as a guarantee of my loyalty. If I don't fulfill my assignments, she would suffer the consequences. Rin remained silent, allowing Han to continue. You're special, Rin, Han continued, still with his forehead to the ground. I've known it for some time, and I know you have the third ring. These last words made Rin tense. You must not approach the Goldcrest Patriarch, Han warned urgently. If they somehow discover the ring is with you, they would realize that neither the king nor the most powerful families have it at hand. That revelation could unleash war, as it would eliminate one of the main uncertainties about the balance of power between Yano and Yino. How do you know so much about the ring and politics? Rin asked, genuinely surprised. I don't even know exactly what this third ring is exactly. Chapter 336, Taming Frustration 6. Han finally raised his face, looking toward where he supposed Rin was. Yino also possesses 2 rings identical to Yano's, except for the third one that you hide, he explained, his voice barely a whisper. The second allows synergizing the powers of 2 tamers into one. Rin realized that was exactly what he had sensed between Sirius and Selphira, and the first helps manifest beasts at a high level, without the dangers of abyssal corruption. Han lowered his voice even further, the words barely carrying to the night air. But nobody knows exactly what the third one does. Yino's remains trapped in crystal, and will stay that way for almost 10 more years. And Yano's third, somehow you've kept it safe. Rin absorbed this information, connecting it with what he already knew thanks to his world mushroom. The resulting picture became increasingly clear and more concerning with each passing moment. Since Harold failed in his mission, Han continued, glancing around to ensure they remained unobserved. Yino suspects that Julius, Selphira, or Sirius, or perhaps all 3 together, hid the ring to set a trap for the Goldcrests. It seems that's why they believe they're being provoked with the Klein and Cashin situation. But then why is Cars in here? if he thinks they'll set a trap for him. Rin stopped, trying to comprehend the complete strategy. On the surface, it doesn't make sense, Han nodded, his eyes scanning the darkness. But in reality, all it means is that Yano is already supporting him at this very moment, waiting for Yano to show its hand. The Gold Crest Patriarch has mobilized many of his followers and has hidden several triple tamers among them. There are more waiting beneath the surface, beyond the perceptive reach of anyone. I received orders to monitor the situation and report on movements and power differences. Surely the same order was given to other spies. But with the enormous power increase, perhaps they're already on their way, Rin murmured, the implications making his blood run cold. That was just a measurement of forces. Han made a significant pause. But if a battle breaks out, they'll know instantly from the manner of power release. So they haven't yet decided to fight, Rin understood. Exactly. And from what I perceive, they're quite evenly matched. Han looked directly to where he believed Rin was standing. That's why you can't risk them discovering the ring is in your hands. You should give it to Selphra or Julius to put Yano in a better position, and avoid war for, if we are lucky, 10 more years. Rin remained motionless, processing the enormity of what he had just heard. He was, unknowingly, the reason, the thin line separating the cities from total war. The color drained from his face, though Han couldn't see it due to the invisibility. I can't hand it over, Rin finally said. The ring, I don't fully understand how it works, and it seems to be integrated with my fungus. Han's eyes widened with surprise. Then, Rin continued with new determination, we have to find that idiotic fungus as soon as possible. If it reaches a conflict site, and somehow they realize it absorbed the ring, everything could fall apart. Han nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. 2 cities, 2 million lives, balanced on the actions of a small luminescent being running freely through the academy grounds. Let's go, he whispered, rising to his feet. There's no time to lose. In which direction did it go? Toward the source of the energy, Rin responded. And thank you for telling me the truth, Rin added, genuinely relieved. Although, technically you had already done so with your actions that day. The small fungus rested on Luna's outstretched hands, who contemplated it as if she had found a legendary creature whose existence the world barely suspected. Her eyes, large and bright, didn't stray from the tiny luminescent being. So, can you talk to all people or just me? Luna asked, tilting her head slightly with genuine curiosity. The fungus, which minutes before had been desperately screaming for help, had discovered something fascinating. When Luna calmed down enough to not only enjoy the high-pitched sound of its voice, but to pay true attention to its words, she began to take them as if they were divine revelations. This presented an unexpected opportunity. I only speak to special people, the fungus responded, deliberately modulating its voice to make it sound more adorable, a task for which it wasn't naturally equipped but was learning with surprising speed. People who can see beyond the ordinary. Luna let out a small squeal of delight. I knew you were special. From the first time I saw you, I thought there was something more than magical about you. And you, too, since we have a connection. The fungus added with a mysterious tone, its light pulsing rhythmically. The deep bond between beings who are destined to meet each other. Luna nodded solemnly, as if she had just heard the answer to one of the great mysteries of the universe. It's exactly what I felt when I saw you, she confessed, gently bringing the fungus closer to her face, as if we were destined to be friends. Luna visibly blushed, a reaction that the fungus filed away as an indication of success in its communicative strategy. In just a few minutes, it had gone from being a prisoner to having its captor completely enchanted. Friends, the fungus repeated, vibrating slightly to increase its luminescence in a way it knew would be charming. I would like that. I've never had a friend like you. Luna smiled, and the fungus knew it had practically won the battle. Luna, it said, using her name for the first time, there's something I must show you. Something wonderful that only someone with your special abilities could fully appreciate. What is it? She asked, leaning forward with anticipation. It's difficult to explain. The fungus responded with feigned shyness, its mushroom cap dimming slightly as if embarrassed. I would have to show you, but first I need something that's in that direction. One of its tiny arms pointed toward where it sensed the ring's presence. The pull as irresistible as ever, but now channeled through a new strategy. Over there, Luna looked in the indicated direction, where the lights of the administrative building shone in the distance. But there are many professors and guards. That's why destiny chose you, the fungus explained, its voice descending to a conspiratorial whisper. With your talent for shadows, you could take us there without anyone seeing us. I want to share that secret only with you. Imagine how special that would be. The fungus swayed slightly, letting its chubby body move in a way it had noticed provoked that melted expression on Luna's face. It worked to perfection. The doubt that had begun to appear on the young Star Weaver's face dissolved like snow under the sun. All right, Luna decided, cradling the fungus against her chest as if it were the most precious treasure in the world. I'll take you there. We're friends now, and friends help each other. Chapter 337, Taming Frustration 7. Selphra and Sirius advanced down the main corridor of the administrative building. They had just separated from Julius and his brothers, who would remain monitoring the Goldcrest camp while they took charge of bringing in the problematic heirs. Their footsteps echoed softly in the empty hallway. Leaving the boys with such little surveillance isn't the best decision, Sirius commented, his voice barely audible, not with Karzan so close and determined to recover them. Allowing him to succeed would be accepting the enemy's superiority, Selphra responded, nodding. But don't worry, I can clearly sense their energies. They're still in their rooms. They had barely left the meeting hall behind when Sirius abruptly stopped, his body tensing slightly. Selphra perceived it instantly, too, her sharpened senses detecting the strangely poorly executed jump of a familiar presence. It seems we have company, Selphra murmured, directing a meaningful look toward a particularly dark corner of the hallway. Sirius appeared visibly uncomfortable, avoiding looking directly at the shadows. Selphra observed him with curiosity before releasing a sigh of resignation. Luna, she called in a firm but not hostile voice. Come out from there. You shouldn't be outside your dormitory, especially tonight. There was a moment of silence, followed by a slight movement in the shadows. Gradually, Luna's Star Weaver's figure emerged from the darkness, her head bowed and her hands hidden behind her back in an unusually shy gesture for her. Selphra glanced sideways at Sirius, who maintained an impenetrable expression, though his clenched fists revealed his inner tension. The ancient Ashenway sighed again, this time with a hint of exasperation. What do you need, little one? Selphra asked, her tone softening slightly. This is no time for nocturnal explorations or mischief. Luna visibly trembled, a behavior so atypical for her that it immediately captured the complete attention of both adults. For an instant, she seemed to be waging an internal battle. Finally, she took a deep breath and, with a quick and determined movement, extended her hands forward. Resting on her palms, illuminated by its own pulsing glow, was Ren's small fungus. The extremely small energy emitted by the fungus began to grow. The reaction was instantaneous and completely unexpected. Both Sirius and Selphra felt an abrupt change in their beasts, as if an electric current had activated them without their permission. It was an unknown sensation for them. Both had been the undisputed conductors of their beasts their entire lives. Selphra's black turtle and Sirius's celestial white tiger resonated involuntarily, partially manifesting in their bodies, without having been summoned. Hardened parts of shell appeared on Selphra's skin, while luminous white patterns covered Sirius's arms. The power of their beasts surged forth unbidden, responding to a call they couldn't resist. The fungus, capturing this reaction, opened its small chubby mouth and began to absorb the energy of Sirius's celestial white tiger. Instead of expanding outward as was usual, began to flow toward the fungus like water into a drain. The imposing presence of the celestial predator, instead of resisting, seemed to surrender voluntarily. Transforming as it was consumed, it became purer, closer to the true nature of the tiger. Speed, freedom, and the wind element that controlled the skies. Simultaneously, Selphra's black turtle experienced the same phenomenon. Its energy of adaptability, resistance, and control over water flowed toward the small creature, purifying itself until only its primordial essence remained. For a brief instant, before the eyes of the two elders, the tiny fungus seemed to grow, transforming into something majestic and enormous, like an existence that had witnessed the birth of the world itself. An ancestral wisdom observed them through those disproportionately large eyes. Sirius took a step back, his normally expressionless face showing genuine surprise when his beast reacted not with aggression, as would have been natural when facing an unknown presence, but with something that could only be described as reverence. The white tiger, a creature of unparalleled pride and power, bowed to the small fungus as if recognizing a long-lost sovereign. The fungus's body now glowed with new lines of energy that interwove in complex patterns within its structure. The enhancements to its capabilities were being born there, though almost no one could perceive them. 15% more in water control, courtesy of Sulphurous Turtle. Also 15% in air control, coming from Sirius's Tiger. The elemental controls of fire and earth obtained from the Chelan and Phoenix also increased to 15%. But there was something more, an additional 10% increase in light and darkness, and a 5% that seemed to strengthen its entire structure. Perhaps an unexpected genetic resonance of 5%. Coming not from Sirius's Tiger, but from a distant connection with the ancestral line of Luna's father. Or perhaps what would have been the lost metal element, present in the tiger's evolutionary line, found an echo in the small being. While Sirius and Sulphur remained paralyzed by surprise, unable to fully comprehend what they had just witnessed, the small fungus directed its attention to Sirius's hand. Its eyes lit up with immeasurable intensity as it fixed its gaze on the ring that the Starweaver Patriarch wore. It was the moment it had been waiting for. The ring, so close, practically calling to it. With its newly enhanced capabilities, it was ready to make the decisive leap. This could be its best opportunity. Luna, completely oblivious to what was really happening, observed the scene with childish fascination. Were they unable to withstand so much cuteness? She thought enthusiastically. I knew he was special. My little friend Mosquito is wonderful. Sulphur was the first to recover part of her composure and realize who the small beast belonged to. Luna, she said in a tense voice, where'd you find this creature? Before Luna could respond, Sirius raised a hand that bore the ring, an instinctive and strange gesture to touch the small fungus. The eyes of the tiny creature shone with anticipation, its small appendages tensing for the leap that would take it toward its objective, its entire being focused on the ring, every receptor aligned with singular purpose. Just one moment more, and the ring would be its. Chapter 338, Taming Frustrations and Timely Intervention. In the Gold Crest temporary tent, Karzan suddenly sat up from his resting bed. His body had not yet fully recovered from the effort of the abyssal manifestation, but his senses remained sharpened, especially for detecting fluctuations in surrounding mana. Do you feel it? He asked the guard at his side. The Starweaver and Ashenway leaders? Karzan nodded, his face contracting with a grimace of disgust. Sulphur and Sirius are manifesting their beast again. His eyes narrowed, the purple tinge in them becoming more pronounced. But there's something else, something strange. Perhaps the third ring was with the old woman after all. He extended his perception, trying to identify that unknown presence that intertwined with familiar energies. It was small, incredibly strange, and also disagreeable in some way. The sensation made him nauseous. It's unpleasant, he murmured, bringing a hand to his chest where the abyssal corruption pulsed rhythmically, as if something were threatening my energy. The guard frowned, unable to perceive what his leader detected. Should we be concerned? Karzan considered the question for a moment before making a decision. Send Neith, he ordered, referring to one of Yino's best spies who had accompanied his entourage. Have him observe from a distance and report what he sees. The guard nodded, silently disappearing to fulfill the order. Karzan remained motionless, contemplating the implications of this new variable in an already complex equation. What were the old guardians plotting now? The small fungus could not contain its excitement. The second ring was there, just centimeters away, glowing with energy that only it could fully appreciate. Its small mouth opened and closed involuntarily, a thread of luminescent drool dripping from its lower lip, while its eyes remained fixed on its objective. Mine, mine, mine. With a tenacity that would have been comical in any other circumstance, the fungus tensed its tiny limbs and jumped from Luna's hands, tracing a perfect arc toward Sirius's hand. its entire being focused on that singular purpose. Every receptor aligned with the goal of reaching the ring. Time seemed to slow as it soared through the air, yet everything happened in fractions of a second. An almost invisible thread cut through the air, tangling around the small body of the fungus in mid-flight. With an almost expert pull, the trajectory was abruptly interrupted, sending the fungus backward like a yo-yo at the end of its string. Simultaneously, a figure partially materialized in the hallway, his hand extended to catch the small fugitive. "Got you!" exclaimed Ren, capturing the fungus in midair and firmly squeezing it between his fingers. The fungus writhed, trying to free itself, but the pressure was too much for its small body. With one last gesture of rebellion, it looked toward the ring with longing before being forced to merge again with its tamer. Inside his body, the small beast tried to escape again, but Ren was no longer distracted like the first time. He forced it to stay inside with the help of the Hydra and pure willpower. "Calm down, you mischievous little demon. You're going to start a war." Ren felt the wave of knowledge and perception returning to his mind like a flood, along with the enhancements the fungus had acquired. His understanding of the surrounding energies instantly sharpened, allowing him to perceive details that had remained hidden during their brief separation. The small fungus also connected with the new information that Ren had from Han, and seemed to calm down a bit, though still reluctant. Ren was also surprised by the improvements, but he had no time to process this new information. Sirius, recovering from the trance into which the fungus's presence had plunged him, reacted instinctively. A flash of light emanated from his body, an expansive wave to reveal any hidden presence. The invisibility covering Run and Han dissipated like fog under the sun, leaving them completely exposed. The amphibian on Ren's shoulder retreated scared into his tamer. Luna, finally processing what had just happened, blushed intensely upon realizing the situation. Her gaze briefly crossed Ren's before she averted it, mortified by her role in this entire debacle. Sirius narrowed his eyes, his gaze passing from Luna to the newly revealed Run with an expression that oscillated between surprise and clear aversion. His face hardened upon noticing the blush on his daughter's cheeks. An almost palpable tension emanated from him as his power subtly increased. "You," he pronounced, his voice cold as ice. "I should have imagined you would be involved in all this." His attention briefly diverted to Han, whom he didn't immediately recognize, before returning to Run. Understanding illuminated his features as he connected the dots. "The creature is yours," he stated, not a question but confirmation. "And we just—" Selphira, who had remained observing the situation with her usual calmness, nodded slightly. "I suspected as much," she murmured, her gaze evaluating Run with a stronger interest. But then, from the corner of her eye, Selphira detected movement in the shadows farther down the hallway, a presence watching them, motionless but attentive. Yaino's spy was already in position. With a deliberately slow movement, Selphira placed her hand on Sirius's shoulder. "Remember where we are. We have visitors," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "They're just small, mischievous children. Let me deal with them." Her eyes subtly shifted toward the shadows where the observer was hiding. The message was clear. They were being watched, and caution was essential. Sirius caught the message instantly. His expression softened marginally, though the tension in his jaw revealed the effort it cost him to contain himself. The shadow at his feet momentarily lengthened, his black snake disappearing from it as if a shadow were breaking in two. "I'll take care of the Goldcrest boys as well, then," he declared in a perfectly controlled voice. "Take them to their rooms." Selphira nodded, turning to the three young people with a severe but not hostile expression. "Luna, Run, and Han, correct?" she said, pointing to the opposite hallway with an elegant gesture. "Please accompany me. We have matters to discuss in private." Her tone left no room for discussion, though the slight inclination of her head suggested that she was as angry as her official attitude wanted her to appear. As they followed Selphira down the corridor, moving away from Sirius, Luna remained flushed, avoiding looking directly at Run. Han maintained a neutral expression, though the tension in his shoulders revealed a concern about the possible consequences of having been discovered. Ren, for his part, was too busy processing the avalanche of information that his fungus was transmitting. Not only the new capability enhancements, But something much more significant related to the ring it had just tried to steal, and its connection to the ancient powers that seemed to be gradually awakening within him. From the shadows of the hallway, Neith, Yino's spy, observed the scene carefully, memorizing every detail for his subsequent report. There was something about the mushroom boy that he found disturbing, but he hadn't noticed the shadow behind him. Chapter 339, Taming the Shadows. Neith remained motionless, like part of the corridor's shadows themselves. His years of training had perfected him in the art of invisibility. Not mere visual concealment, but a complete suppression of his presence. His breathing, so slow that it barely disturbed the surrounding air. His scent, so light that the best beast's olfactory senses would take several minutes to perceive. And his mana, hidden so deep within his core that it didn't stand out even in the city's almost null mana environment. He observed the three young people and the elderly Ashenway walking away down the opposite hallway. It was time to return and complete his mission. He would withdraw to inform Karzan of what he had witnessed. The information about the strange glowing creature would be of particular interest to his masters. It was then that he felt it. A subtle change in the density of the shadows behind him. An almost imperceptible shift in the texture of darkness. A stealth as good as his own. The black snake launched itself behind him, its shadow attack unfurling like a wave of ink in the night. But Neith was no ordinary spy. His dark trickster spirit, a silver 3-rank beast with natural affinity for shadows, responded instantly. The snake's attack was canceled against an equally dense shadow barrier. Each strand of darkness counteracted. With a fluid movement, Neith reversed the dynamics of attack and defense. His trickster extended shadow tentacles that coiled around the snake. The shadow tendrils wrapped around the serpent, restricting its movement. They've discovered me, he thought, maintaining calm despite the situation. The decision was made in a fraction of a second. Priority, immediate withdrawal. He began to melt into the shadows of the floor, his body rapidly vanishing. It was a technique he had used and perfected over decades, an infallible escape even against higher-level tamers. The cage would only last an instant against the trapped silver 3-rank snake, but it should give him the precious milliseconds he needed to completely disappear. But something changed much faster than expected. The captured snake seemed to dissolve. The chains imprisoning it broke instantly to Neith's surprise. A flash of light, so intense it seemed to tear the very fabric of darkness, burst from the snake's core. Where the snake had been, now stood Sirius Starweaver. And just before Neith could escape, Sirius's hand closed around his throat, ripping him from the shadows and lifting him off the ground with surprising strength. Spy from Yino or the Gold Crests, Sirius pronounced, his voice as cold as ice. Did you think we wouldn't notice your presence? Neith was genuinely astonished. His concealment technique was legendary among Yino agents, capable of deceiving even several beasts specialized in detection. He hadn't expected to be discovered with such ease, much less caught with such precision. Suicide or forced escape? But he hadn't survived so many years in his profession by surrendering to the first complication. With a calm born of countless life-or-death situations, he made a quick decision. He activated his trump card. If he used it, he would reveal the use of abyssal power among Karzan's troops. But the leader had already used it himself, so it should have little significance to use a bit more for a second. His second beast, hidden until that moment, emerged to the surface. The abyssal dark coyote, a synthetic creature specialized in escape and information gathering. A perfect complement to his trickster. His body combined and expanded, altering the structure of his cells to make them more malleable. The corrupt synergy between both beasts transformed his body. His shadows mixed with the abyssal corruption, converting his humanoid form into something black and more fluid. Sirius squeezed, but his fingers sank into a mass that was no longer completely solid. Despite this, thanks to his shadow control, he didn't let go. However, Neith's neck had transformed, shifting laterally while his arm took its place in the grip. A distorted and cacophonous laugh, a mix of the coyote's howls and the trickster's cackles, resonated in the hallway. Neith opened a mouth that had expanded far beyond natural limits, revealing rows of sharp teeth that glowed with a sickly purple tone. With a brutal movement, he sank these fangs into his own arm, cleanly severing it from Sirius's grip. The separated limb lost its shadows and became normal in Sirius' hand, while Neith plunged into the floor again at a vertiginous speed. "I've made it," thought Neith, feeling the freedom of the shadow jump. The between space welcomed him, a realm of pure darkness where he was faster than anyone, not even a gold tamer can. His thought was abruptly interrupted when he felt a presence behind him. Impossible. No one could follow him inside his own shadow jump. It was supposed to be an absolute domain, an inviolable sanctuary. And yet, there was Sirius, sliding through the darkness as if it were the domain's sovereign. Starweaver's face had transformed. His eyes, normally cold and expressionless, now burned with fury. The irritation initially directed at Run had turned into pure anger, fueled by the abyssal presence he had detected in the spy. "Don't underestimate a guardian," Sirius growled, his voice distorted by the Shadow Realm's properties. A strange light spun around him, interwoven with shadows in a perfect and impossible balance. The pure white of a celestial tiger merged with the absolute blackness of a serpent. With a movement that defied all logic, Sirius extended his hands toward the very edges of the dimensional tunnel through which they were traveling. His fingers seemed to grab the fabric of shadows and, with a brutal pull, tore the bridge. The world around them fragmented. Neith felt how he was violently expelled from the intermediate space. His body forcibly materialized in the hallway. The transition was so abrupt, so contrary to the natural laws of shadow jump, that his body suffered the equivalent of a dimensional whiplash. Pain beyond description tore through him as his physical form was wrenched back into reality. Before he could recover, Sirius emerged beside him. But this was no longer the same Sirius who had initiated the pursuit. Sirius had fused the power of his beasts, reaching a state that few tamers in the world could even conceive. With a speed that contradicted his apparent calm, Sirius lunged at Neith. His hands, now wrapped in that strange combination of light and darkness, pierced through the spy's shadow armor as if it were wet paper. Neith felt how his last defense and his mutations were vanishing. The coyote and the trickster tried to reform protective shell, but Sirius's mixed energy neutralized their efforts. The corruption that had been his strength now writhed in agony, unable to withstand the light of the tiger combined with the darkness of the snake. Sirius's hand closed again around his throat, this time with an inflexible firmness. Neith tried to transform once more, but discovered with horror that his control over his own form had been nullified. "Yeah, I know," Sirius pronounced, his voice resonating with power. The fingers began to squeeze, gradually increasing the pressure. Neith felt how his trachea began to yield under the relentless force. "Abyssal corruption," Sirius continued, "is not a power that should be mastered. It is a plague that must be exterminated." The first crack was soft, almost inaudible, cartilage yielding under pressure. Neith tried to speak, negotiate, beg, but no sound could escape from his compressed throat. Sirius's eyes, now two orbs of intermingled light and darkness, showed no mercy whatsoever. The shadow of the coming war, the threat to his family, to his everything was symbolically concentrated in this act of elimination. The second crack was more audible, the hyoid bone fracturing under inexorable pressure. Neith's eyes opened wide, absolute terror reflected in them as life began to leave his body. The Yino spy, who had survived countless impossible missions, who had outwitted the best security systems and many powerful tamers, met his end in a dark hallway at the hands of the power he had fatally underestimated. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was Sirius's face, not with the satisfaction of victory, but with the somber resolution of one who knows that this is probably only the first death of many to come. The final crack resonated in the empty hallway, followed by the soft sound of a lifeless body sliding to the shadows on the floor. Chapter 340, Taming Ancient Stories. Silence enveloped the small group as they walked through the quiet corridors. Selphra led the way, while the three young people followed at a respectful distance, none daring to break the silence. It was a quick wave of power, emanating from where they had left Sirius, that finally altered the atmosphere. A brief but intense pulsation that made the youngsters momentarily stop in their tracks. Selphra showed no visible reaction, but her eyes narrowed slightly before turning toward the young people. "Run," she finally said, her voice lacking the accusatory tone the youngsters had anticipated. "Why did you let your creature go out alone?" Before Ren could respond, she looked at Luna. "And you, little star weaver, why did you bring it to us?" Luna lowered her gaze to the floor, her cheeks burning with an intense blush. Her fingers intertwined nervously as she seemed to search for words that wouldn't come. Ren, understanding it was better if he spoke first, stepped forward. "I didn't let it out," he responded honestly. "It acted on its own. It escaped from me." Selfer remained silent, studying the young man as if trying to decipher a particularly enigmatic text. "It acted on its own," she finally repeated. "Interesting." She paused, her eyes never leaving Ren's face. "Can you control it now?" Ren nodded with confidence. "Yes, completely." "What changed?" Ren hesitated a moment, uncertain of the real importance of his answer. The mushrooms in his hair dimmed slightly, reflecting his caution. "I think it learned about worse consequences if it didn't surrender its intention for now," he explained, carefully choosing his words. "And I'm cautious not to let it control the mana flow to manifest itself on its own again." Selfer's expression remained inscrutable, but something in her eyes changed, a flash of recognition or perhaps remembrance. "Long ago," she began, her voice acquiring a softer tone, almost nostalgic, "it seems there existed a person about whom there were legends that are no longer told." The three young people leaned slightly forward, drawn by the change in her tone. According to that legend, this person had cultivated a real dragon. This was when the ruins were not yet ruins. Selfer made a vague gesture with her hand, the movement leaving a brief trail of energy in the air. That dragon was incredibly powerful and apparently difficult to control as a beast. Ren couldn't contain his curiosity. "And what happened to him?" "Nothing. It only helped him discover many things about the flow of mana," Selfer continued with a smile. "And supposedly to build gates and keys. Why don't they ever tell us anything about this in the official histories?" asked Ren, his mind connecting this information with what he already knew about the ruins and the rings. Selfer smiled slightly again, but the expression didn't reach her eyes. "It's incomplete information coming from very damaged and fragile archives of my family," she explained. "Besides, there are more important things there that we don't want to make public." She shrugged. "It doesn't really matter. It's just that your mention of your beast, Free, will reminded me of that old story." The elderly woman leaned slightly toward Ren, her voice dropping to a barely audible whisper. "Perhaps your beast is stronger and more difficult to control than everyone believes." Ren gave a nervous laugh, but couldn't hide the tension in his shoulders. The mushrooms in his hair dimmed further. "However," Selfer continued, straightening again, "stealing is wrong, and your beast is your responsibility. The current situation doesn't lend itself to losing more power on our side." Her expression softened slightly, the ancient authority giving way to genuine curiosity. "Though I would be interested in you teaching me about that ray that seemed to purify your companion Klein during your combat." Ren nodded, surprised by the request, but willing to try to fulfill it, though it would be hard to explain. The purifying energy had channeled almost by instinct. "First, I'll take you all to your rooms," Selfer decided. "Afterward, you and I will talk privately. You will answer about today, too. Miss Luna." Han and Luna, who had been listening attentively to conversation, let out twin sighs of disappointment. As they turned at the next corridor, they found themselves face to face with Lynn. She seemed visibly annoyed, but her expression changed instantly upon recognizing Selfera. Her back straightened, and her face adopted a mask of formal respect. "Lady Ashenway," she greeted with a precise bow. "Lynn," Selfer responded with a slight nod. "It seems your pupil is quite difficult to contain. You should keep him better watched in situations like this." Lynn directed a sharp look at Ron, who had the decency to appear remorseful. "My sincerest apologies," Lynn responded, bowing again, her crane momentarily shrinking in shared embarrassment. "It won't happen again." Selfer sighed, an expression of resignation briefly crossing her face. "Although, to be fair," she added with a hint of entertainment in her voice, "this young man in particular seems to have a special talent for escaping surveillance." Luna and Han nodded in unison, silently confirming this assessment. "Still," Selfer continued, In times like these, we need particular attention with exceptional students. Their actions can have considerable unforeseen consequences. Lynn nodded, understanding the underlying message. I will personally ensure that these 3 young people return to their dormitories immediately, Lynn assured, and I'll make sure they remain there until further notice. Excellent, Selfer approved. As for you, Run, I'll send someone to fetch you when things calm down a bit for our conversation. As Lynn took over, guiding the 3 students toward their respective rooms, Selfer watched them go. Klein paced back and forth in his room, unable to keep still. Every few steps he stopped by the window, looked outside, and then continued his circular route, like a caged animal. The initial adrenaline of having defied Cashin began to dilute, giving way to growing anxiety. With each passing minute, regret settled more deeply into his consciousness. Idiot, he muttered to himself. Why did I have to provoke him? If Cashin somehow managed to escape, or worse yet, if he was released, Klein knew perfectly well that his brother was not someone who easily forgot offenses. He would collect on them, and with interest. Maybe I should try to reconcile, he briefly thought, before dismissing the idea with a shake of his head. No, it's too late for that. Besides, he used me as an experimental pawn. I don't owe him anything. 3 sharp knocks on the door interrupted his thoughts, startling him. His heart skipped a beat. The first image across his mind was that of his brother, somehow free and smiling with that expression that always preceded a particularly unpleasant lesson. Who is it? He asked, hating the slight tremor in his voice. There was no immediate response, only the metallic sound of a key turning in the lock.